In the far silence of deep space, a signal drifted. It was weak, broken, and almost forgotten. For centuries, it traveled across the stars, carrying words that no one wanted to hear. The signal whispered through dust clouds, past dying suns, and over ruined worlds. Most ships ignored it. Some governments had heard it long ago, but refused to listen. They feared the meaning behind it. Others dismissed it as nothing more than static. And so the signal continued, year after year, with no reply. On Earth, the year was 2147. Humanity had built its first true deep space listening array. The giant dish stood on a cold plateau in South America, staring into the black sky. It was designed to hear the whispers of the universe, the faintest signals from distant galaxies. For months it picked up nothing unusual. Then, one night, something strange appeared. A weak rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, reached the array's sensors. The scientists thought it was interference at first, but the pattern repeated again and again, like someone whispering from far away. Dr. Amelia Cross, the lead scientist, leaned closer to her screen. The pattern was not random. She froze as she realized what it was: language. It was not human. It was not coded in any system Earth had ever used. Yet it carried structure, rhythm, and a voice hidden inside the static. The team worked for hours, cleaning the noise, adjusting the filters, until at last the words became clear. And what they heard sent a chill across the room. "We are dying. Is anyone out there?" The room fell silent. The message repeated, broken but desperate. Dr. Cross looked at her team. No one spoke. Everyone knew this was not a human voice. It was older. It was weary. It carried sorrow, so heavy it felt like the stars themselves were crying. The discovery spread in whispers through secret channels. Governments argued. Should Earth answer? Was it safe? Some said it was a trap. Why would no other race answer this call? They asked. If it was real, surely others would have acted by now. Others argued that to ignore the message was to abandon a life, a chance to prove humanity's heart among stars. The debate grew louder, but still the signal kept coming, repeating the same broken words across the galaxy. In the halls of the United Nations, world leaders gathered in silence. The room was tense as the recording played again. The voice was alien, but the pain was human. It spoke of loss. It spoke of desperation, and it carried across the light years like a ghost. Some leaders wanted to shut it down. They feared what waited at the other end, but others could not ignore it. One voice, President Aisha Rahman of Earth's Council, stood and said, "If they are dying, then they called not for the Council, not for the Empire, but for anyone who would listen. We are the ones who heard. If we do nothing, we are no better than those who stayed silent." Meanwhile, the signal began to pull ordinary people as well. Despite the government's attempts at secrecy, the message leaked. Across the internet, people whispered about the lost signal. Some were afraid. Some were thrilled. Many believed it was humanity's destiny to answer. On the streets of every city, people looked up at the stars and wondered who had called out for help and what had silenced them. Back at the listening station, Dr. Cross stayed awake night after night, listening to the signal. It was decaying, growing weaker, as if whatever was sending it was finally dying out. Sometimes, late at night, she swore she could hear more than just words. She thought she could hear the faint echo of screams, of ships burning, of silence swallowing whole worlds. Whether it was her imagination or something hidden in the recording, she did not know. But one thing was clear. The signal was running out of time. The question now pressed on every leader, every scientist, every curious mind on Earth. Should humanity answer? No one else had. No empire, no alien council, no other species had spoken back. The message had traveled for hundreds, maybe thousands of years without reply. Why? Was it cursed? Was it a warning? Or was it truly the last cry of a dying people? On the edge of night, staring into the glow of her monitor, Dr. Cross whispered to herself, "If we don't answer, then who will?" And with that thought, a decision began to form on Earth. Somewhere, far away, a civilization had sent a final plea into the void, a call lost in the stars. Now humanity stood at the edge of history. To remain silent was safe, but to speak back, to answer, might change everything. The debate spread across Earth like wildfire. In secret halls of power and on the crowded streets of cities, the question burned in every mind. Should humanity answer the signal? The recording was played again and again before leaders, scientists, and generals. The alien voice was weak, but clear enough to be understood. It carried no threat, no weapon, no command. Only sorrow. We are dying. Is anyone out there? Some officials demanded silence. They said no one must reply. They warned that if the signal had been ignored for centuries, it was for a reason. Perhaps other civilizations had heard it and chosen not to risk their survival. If it is a trap, one general said, then by answering, we are putting Earth in danger. But others argued differently. They saw the signal not as a trap, but as a test. We have always looked up at the stars, said President Aisha Rahman, her voice steady. We dreamed of finding someone else out there, and now we have. They called for help, and only we heard. To ignore them would be to ignore our own humanity. The council chamber fell silent after her words. Around her, many leaders frowned, but many others nodded slowly. The decision was not yet made, but the seed had been planted. In laboratories across the world, scientists studied the signal. They mapped its path, calculating its origin. The faint trail pointed to a distant system on the edge of a red sun. The distance was vast, but not unreachable. Humanity had recently mastered faster-than-light travel in limited bursts. A single scout ship could make the journey, though it would take months. In the corridors of the United Nations Space Command, military officers and scientists gathered to decide who would go. They argued long into the night. Some wanted to send drones, machines with no life to risk. Others said it would take living people to truly understand the message. In the end, the decision was made. A crew would go. Humanity would send its first mission to follow the lost signal. Among the chosen was Captain Elena Ruiz, a woman known for her steady hand and fearless resolve. She had served in exploration missions across the outer colonies. She was young compared to many officers, but her crew trusted her. When she was told of the mission, she stood silent for a long moment. Then she gave a small nod. If no one else will answer, she said, then we will. Her words carried across the room, giving courage to those around her. She knew the risk. She knew they might not come back. But deep in her heart, she felt the call was not something to ignore. It was not only a mission. It was a duty. Back on Earth, the public began to sense something was happening. Rumors leaked of a mission, whispers of a ship preparing to leave. Some people cheered, proud that humanity might be the first to answer the stars. Others feared what would happen if the aliens behind the message were dangerous. Protests and celebrations filled the streets side by side. The whole world felt the tension, as if standing at the edge of a cliff. Dr. Amelia Cross, who had first uncovered the signal, stood with the mission team as they prepared. She handed Captain Ruiz a final recording of the alien words. Remember, she said softly, they may not even be alive anymore. You might find nothing but ruins. But if they are alive, even one of them, then you will be the first human voice they ever hear. Ruiz nodded and placed the small recorder into her pack. She carried no speeches, no orders, only a simple promise. The day of departure came quickly. The ship chosen was the Horizon, a small but capable vessel equipped with jump engines and reinforced hull. It was not built for war. It was built for endurance and survival. As the crew boarded, a silence fell over the launch site. Families stood behind glass walls, watching as their loved ones climbed the ramp. Some wept quietly. Others stood tall, trying to show pride instead of fear. Ruiz gave one last look at the crowd, then turned to her ship. She knew the history of this moment. Humanity was stepping into the unknown, chasing a voice across the stars. Inside the ship, the crew prepared the jump sequence. The hum of engines filled the air, steady and strong. The control panels lit up with green signals. Ruiz sat in the command chair, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. In her hand, she held a small piece of paper, written with one line of the alien message. We are dying. She kept it close, as a reminder of why they were leaving. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The world held its breath. 7, 6, 5. The engines roared louder. 4, 3, 2. The horizon glowed with the power of the jump drive. 1. With a flash of light, the ship tore through the fabric of space and vanished into the unknown. For a long moment, silence filled the command center back on Earth. Then the screens showed the horizon had entered the void safely. Cheers erupted. Some cried, some shouted, some simply stood frozen. Humanity had done it. They had answered. For the first time in history, Earth had spoken back to the stars. Yet as the horizon traveled deeper into space, following the trail of the signal, a shadow of unease spread through the crew. The message had been ignored by every other race in the galaxy. Why? What had they feared? Ruiz stared at the stars and whispered under her breath, "Let's hope we are not too late." And far away, in the endless dark, something stirred. The signal was still whispering, still calling, as if guiding them closer to its source. But hidden beneath its faint cry, a static began to grow stronger, a static that sounded almost alive. The horizon drifted into the unknown, following the faint trail of the signal. For weeks, the stars passed silently outside the windows, endless oceans of darkness broken only by scattered pinpoints of light. At first, the crew was filled with energy, their spirits lifted by the weight of their mission. They laughed during meals, spoke of home, and dreamed of what they might discover at the end of the signal. But as the days stretched into weeks, the silence of space began to sink into their bones. Space was vast, cold, and merciless. The further they traveled, the more they realized how alone they truly were. The signal grew stronger as they pressed forward, but with it came something else. A faint static that scratched at their instruments. At first, the crew dismissed it as background noise, interference from nearby stars. But as time went on, the static grew clearer, sharper, almost as if something was breathing within it. The engineers checked the systems again and again, convinced the problem was inside the ship. But the horizon was clean. The noise was coming from outside. Captain Ruiz sat in her chair every night, listening through the comms. Sometimes she swore she could hear shapes inside the static, like faint whispers, like someone trying to speak, but always just out of reach. It made her uneasy, but she said nothing to the crew. They needed focus, not fear. One day, the horizon crossed into an empty system, its sun long dead, reduced to a cold sphere of ash. Around it drifted shattered fragments of rock and twisted metal. The crew gasped when they saw the ruins. A broken ring station floated silently, its edges burned black, its interior hollow. No lights, no life, just wreckage. The horizon scanned the debris and found traces of technology. It was old, too old to belong to humanity. The station had been built by someone else, someone long gone. Ruiz ordered silence as they drifted closer. The scanners picked up no movement, but the static on their instruments grew stronger. It rose and fell like waves, as if the dead system itself was breathing. They moved on, shaken but determined. The horizon passed through system after system, and in each they found more signs of ruin. Burned-out colonies, silent satellites, ships torn apart and left adrift. It was as if the path of the signal was marked by the graves of civilization. The crew grew quieter with every discovery. Even the young engineer who always joked at dinner now sat in silence, staring at his food. They all felt it. Something terrible had happened here. The signal was not just a cry for help. It was the echo of destruction. Weeks later, the static grew so strong that it began to bleed into the ship's audio systems. At night, the crew heard faint voices whispering through the intercoms, though no one was speaking. Ruiz walked the halls alone and swore she could hear footsteps behind her. The ship's AI reported no errors, no intruders. The sound was not in the ship. It was in the signal. The voice within the static seemed to grow sharper as they closed the distance. Sometimes it sounded like screaming, other times like laughter. And once, just once, Ruiz thought she heard her own name. The crew began to whisper among themselves. Some said the signal was cursed. Some said it was a warning, not a plea. Maybe that's why no one else answered. One officer muttered in the dark. But no one dared speak too loudly. They all knew it was too late to turn back. They had crossed too far, and Earth was counting on them. They had to see it through. Ruiz gathered them in the mess hall and looked each of them in the eye. "Fear is natural," she said softly. "But we came to answer. If we turn back now, then we are no better than those who stayed silent. Whatever waits at the end of this path, we face it together." Her words steadied them, at least for a time. Finally, after months of travel, the signal reached its peak. They were close. The horizon entered a red star system, its light weak and sickly. Planets circled in broken orbits, many scarred and lifeless. The scanners picked up the source immediately. It came from a small world near the dying sun, its surface cracked and blackened like burned stone. From orbit, the crew could see towers crumbling, cities reduced to rubble, and a great scar across the planet's surface, as if fire had consumed it. Yet at the center of this ruined world stood one tower still alive with power, still sending the same faint message across the stars. "We are dying. Is anyone out there?" The horizon descended slowly through the broken skies. The static screamed in their ears now, sharp and cutting. The instruments flickered as though the planet itself resisted their presence. Ruiz gripped her chair as the ship shook. The crew sat in silence, their hearts pounding. They were finally here. The lost signal had led them to a graveyard of a world, a planet that should have been dead but still whispered into the void. As the horizon touched down on the surface, the crew looked out at the ruined city around them. The silence was heavy, almost alive. The tower loomed in the distance, tall and broken, but still glowing faintly with energy. Ruiz rose from her seat and spoke the words everyone was thinking. "This is it. The ones who called are here, or what's left of them." And as they stepped out onto the dead soil, the static in their comms gave one final burst. For a single moment, the message changed. For the first time, it did not say the words they had always heard. Instead, it whispered something new, something chilling. "They're still here." The air on the ruined planet was thin and cold. Dust swirled across the broken ground as the Horizon's crew stepped onto the surface. Their boots crunched against ash that had once been soil. The sky above was a sickly red, lit by the dying sun that barely gave warmth. Around them stretched the ruins of a city. Towers leaned at broken angles, their walls scarred by fire. Streets were filled with rubble, and collapsed machines long turned to rust. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. It felt as if time itself had stopped the day this world had fallen. In the distance, the towers still stood, glowing faintly, whispering the same signal into the stars. Captain Ruiz led the way, her rifle slung across her chest, though no enemy was in sight. The static in her helmet buzzed, louder now, almost humming like a low voice. The rest of the crew followed in silence, their eyes scanning the ruins with unease. Dr. Amelia Cross, who had insisted on joining the mission, carried her scanner close to her chest. Every few steps, she paused, frowning at the strange readings. "The energy here is old," she muttered. "Older than anything we've seen, but something is still alive." No one replied. They all felt it. The planet was not as dead as it appeared. The closer they came to the tower, the more the ruins revealed strange details. Carvings on broken walls showed tall, slender figures with glowing eyes, holding hands in circles around what looked like stars. Statues lay shattered, their faces weathered by centuries but still carrying expressions of hope. "This was once a great city," whispered Lieutenant Hayes, his voice soft with awe. "Whoever they were, they built something beautiful here." Ruiz only nodded, keeping her weapon ready. Beauty could not hide the truth that something had destroyed it all. At last they reached the base of the tower. Its structure rose high into the sky, cracked and crumbling, but still pulsing with a faint blue light. The hum of energy vibrated through their boots. A massive door stood at the entrance, half buried under fallen stone. With effort, the crew cleared the debris and forced it open. The air that escaped was dry, carrying the scent of dust and something older, like burned metal. They stepped inside. The interior of the tower was dim, lit by weak strands of blue energy running through the walls like veins. Machines hummed faintly, far beyond their expected lifetime. The architecture was elegant but alien, filled with curves and sharp points that twisted upward toward the ceiling. As they walked deeper, the static in their comms began to shift. It no longer sounded like noise. It sounded like breathing. Dr. Cross's scanner beeped sharply. "I'm picking up life signs," she said, her voice tight. "Weak, very weak, but definitely alive." The crew froze. They had all expected ruins, maybe corpses, or nothing at all. None of them had expected survivors. Ruiz gave the order to move carefully. They climbed higher through the tower, their footsteps echoing against the alien stone. The halls grew narrower, filled with glowing pods lining the walls. The crew stopped in shock. There were hundreds of them, cryopods, tall and slender, filled with a faint mist. Inside, each lay a figure, thin bodies, elongated limbs, and faces with closed eyes. Their skin shimmered faintly, as if woven with light. They looked fragile, like glass, but their features carried an undeniable grace. Some pods were cracked, their occupants long dead, nothing but dust. But others still glowed faintly, keeping their sleepers alive. Dr. Cross pressed her hands against the glass of one pod. "They're still here," she whispered. "The Eliari, that must be their name." She pointed to symbols carved into the walls, repeating again and again beside the pods. Ruiz stared at the frozen faces. 1,000 questions burned in her mind. How long had they been here? Why had no one answered their call? And what had destroyed them? Suddenly, one of the pods hissed. The crew jumped back, weapons raised. Mist spilled into the air as the glass door slowly opened. Inside, the figure stirred. Thin hands reached outward, trembling. Eyes opened, glowing faintly with silver light. The alien sat up, weak and unsteady, breathing shallow gasps. For a moment, the crew did not move. Then Ruiz stepped forward, lowering her weapon and raising her hands in peace. "We heard her call," she said firmly. "We are human. We came to answer." The alien's gaze fixed on her, confusion flashing across its features. Its voice was weak, cracked from centuries of silence. "You are not the council, not the others." It looked around, fear in its glowing eyes. "We sent the message, but no one came. No one answered. Why only you?" Dr. Cross knelt beside the pod, speaking softly. "We don't know why, but we heard you. We followed your signal. We came because we could not let you die in silence." The alien's eyes filled with something that looked like sorrow. Its head bowed, as if remembering pain too heavy to bear. "We are the Eliari," it whispered. "We were many. Now we are few. The call was never meant to be heard, not by you. If you came," its voice trembled, "then it is still out there." The crew exchanged uneasy looks. Ruiz leaned forward. "What is still out there?" she asked. But the Eliari only shook its head weakly. "The destroyer, the Vorak, they hunt the stars. They hunt the signal. We sent it as a warning, but also as hope. And now, you are here." Silence filled the chamber. The cryopods hummed softly, keeping their frozen guardians alive. The alien before them swayed weakly, then reached out and touched Ruiz's hand with trembling fingers. Its voice was almost a whisper now. "If you came, then humanity is in danger too. The Vorak will find you." The crew stood frozen. The horizon had followed the signal across the stars, thinking they were saving a dying people. But now they realized the truth. The signal had not just been a plea for help. It had been a warning, one ignored by every other race in the galaxy. Only humanity had answered. And now, because of that choice, they might have doomed themselves. The Eliari's eyes glowed faintly in the dim chamber, their silver light reflecting off the glass pods that surrounded the humans. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the weak hum of ancient machines that had kept these beings alive for centuries. Captain Ruiz studied the fragile figure before her. It looked as though a strong wind could shatter its body, yet its presence carried a weight that made the humans feel small. She spoke softly, careful not to frighten it. "We are here to help. If you tell us what happened, We can try to understand. Who destroyed your world? The Ellery's thin hands trembled as it struggled to rise from the pod. Dr. Cross quickly supported it, lowering it gently back down. The alien's voice cracked like brittle glass, but the words were clear. The Vorik, machines of endless hunger. They do not build. They do not speak. They only consume. They heard our signal. They followed it. And they ended us. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Lieutenant Hayes frowned deeply, gripping his weapon tighter. So, the signal was bait? A trap to draw others in? The Iliari shook its head weakly. No, it was hope. We believed someone might answer before the Vorik destroyed us completely. But no one came. Not the Council. Not our allies. They abandoned us. We were alone. Captain Ruiz's jaw tightened. She felt anger rising in her chest. Abandoned. Ignored. Left to die in silence. Humanity had only just entered the stars, yet they already knew what it felt like to be overlooked by the so-called greater powers. She crouched beside the Iliari and spoke firmly. You are not alone anymore. We came because we could not ignore you. Humanity does not turn away from those who call for help. The alien studied her face with wide, glowing eyes, as though weighing her words. At last it whispered, You should not have come. By answering, you have placed yourselves in their path. The static in the humans' helmets suddenly surged, buzzing sharply, filling their ears. For a heartbeat, they thought the comms had failed. But then, buried inside the static, came a sound. A low, grinding tone, unnatural and cold, almost mechanical. Ruiz froze. Did you hear that? She asked. Every crew member nodded silently, their faces pale. The Ellery's eyes widened with fear. They know. They always know. It clutched Ruiz's hand with surprising strength. You must leave this place. If the Vorik find you, your world will burn as ours did. Dr. Cross leaned closer, her voice urgent. But how we stop them? There must be something you know. Something we can use. The Iliari shook its head slowly, sorrow heavy in its voice. We tried. We fought with fire, with fleets, with every weapon we built. Nothing stopped them. They adapt. They devour. They cannot be reasoned with. The Council hides, fearing to draw their attention. That is why no one answered our call. It looked away, its glowing eyes dimming. You should have ignored it too. The crew fell silent, the weight of the words pressing down on them. For a moment, doubt crept into their hearts. Had humanity made a terrible mistake by answering? Ruiz stood tall, her voice sharp with defiance. No, if the Vorik exist, then running will not save us forever. We will not cower in silence like the others. If they come, humanity will stand. Her words carried strength, but inside she felt the chill of uncertainty. Humanity's fleets were small, its weapons untested against such an enemy. But still, something deep within her refused to surrender to fear. The Iliari studied her again, as if trying to understand this strange species that dared to speak of resistance where others had only accepted death. Finally, it whispered, Perhaps that is why you're different. Perhaps that is why you came. Its thin body trembled, exhaustion overtaking it. Dr. Cross quickly signaled for medkits. The crew injected stabilizers, trying to keep the alien alive. The Ellery's breathing slowed, but its hand still gripped Ruiz's arm tightly. If you fight, then you must be ready. The Vorik are not far. When you answered, they heard you. They will come. Ruiz's heart pounded. She looked around the chamber filled with cryopods, hundreds of Iliari still sleeping in silence. How many of your people can we save? She asked. The alien closed its eyes. Not many. Too long, too late. But some can be woken. Enough to remember who we were. Enough to help you if you choose to fight. A low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Dust rained down from the cracked ceiling. The crew froze, weapons raised. Hayes shouted, Captain, sensors are picking up movement. Something's entering the atmosphere. Ruiz's mind raced. It was too soon. They had only just arrived, yet already the enemy was here. She looked back at the Iliari, who whispered with the last of its strength, They come. The Vorik come. Ruiz stood tall, her eyes burning with determination. She turned to her crew. when not leaving empty-handed. Wake as many Iliari as you can. Get them to the horizon. We move now. The crew scrambled into action, forcing open pods, dragging weak survivors into stretchers. The tower echoed with alarms as ancient systems stirred, warning of the intruders above. Outside, the sky darkened as shadows fell across the ruined city. Through the cracked walls, Ruiz caught her first glimpse of them. Black shapes descending from the clouds, their forms jagged and sharp, like broken metal given life. They moved with terrifying precision, their bodies glowing with crimson light. The Vorik had arrived, and as the ground shook under their landing, Ruiz knew the truth. This was no simple mission of rescue. By answering the lost signal, humanity had stepped into a war older and darker than anything they had ever known. The real fight had only just begun. The Vorik descended like shadows given form. From the clouds, black machines rained down, their bodies jagged and sharp, each one moving with mechanical grace. Their limbs shifted like blades, their crimson cores pulsed with a sick rhythm, and the sound of their descent filled the ruined city with a metallic roar. The crew of the Horizon watched from the tower windows, their hearts pounding. It was the first time any human eyes had seen the Vorik, and already the crew understood why the Iliari called them destroyers. They were not ships. They were not soldiers. They were something in between, living machines built for one purpose: consumption. Captain Ruiz barked orders. Move! Get the Iliari out now! The crew rushed to open cryopods, dragging the weak survivors toward the exit. Some Iliari awoke screaming in confusion, their glowing eyes wide with terror as they saw the Vorik outside. They remembered. They had seen this before. Dr. Cross tried to calm them, her voice firm but gentle. You're safe. We're here to help. Just stay with us. But even as she spoke, she knew safety was a lie. The Vorik were already advancing. The ground shook as the first of the machines landed outside the tower. Their sharp limbs pierced the soil as they moved forward, scanning the ruins with beams of red light. One beam struck the tower wall, leaving a smoking scar behind. Lieutenant Hayes raised his rifle and cursed under his breath. Those things aren't scouting. They're hunting. Ruiz lifted her own weapon, though she knew bullets would mean little against machines that had ended civilizations. We need time. We hold them off long enough to get the Iliari to the ship. The Vorik struck with terrifying speed. A piercing shriek filled the air as one of them sliced through the outer wall, its metal body tearing stone like paper. The crew opened fire, their rifles spitting energy bolts into the machine's glowing core. Sparks flew as shots tore into its armor, but the Vorik adapted instantly. Its plates shifted, sealing the damage, and within seconds it advanced again as though nothing had happened. Hayes shouted in frustration. They heal themselves. Ruiz didn't hesitate. Aim for the core. That red light, shut it down. Together they focused fire on the pulsing glow at the center of the Vorik's chest. This time, the machine staggered. With a final shot, its core shattered, and the Vorik collapsed into a heap of lifeless metal. But even as it fell, 3 more emerged from the smoke. The Iliari survivors wailed in fear, their voices carrying centuries of trauma. One of them clutched Dr. Cross's arm, whispering frantically, "You cannot fight them. We tried. We burned our skies with fire. We filled the stars with ships. Nothing stopped them." Cross looked at Ruiz, her face pale. If what they're saying is true, Ruiz cut her off sharply. Then we don't have the luxury of surrender. Move. The crew split into 2 groups. One carried the Iliari toward the horizon, guiding them through rubble and dust. The other fought in the tower's entrance, holding the Vorik back with everything they had. Explosions rocked the walls, filling the air with smoke and fire. Hayes tossed grenades that tore apart enemy limbs, buying precious seconds. Ruiz fired until her rifle overheated, her eyes locked on the advancing horde. Every Vorik that fell seemed to teach the others new ways to resist. Their armor thickened, their movements adjusted, their attacks grew sharper. It was as if the machines learned with each death. Dr. Cross pulled a trembling Iliari child into her arms, shielding it from falling debris. The alien's glowing eyes stared at her with fear and confusion. "Why did you come?" it asked in a weak voice. Cross swallowed hard. "Because you asked. Because no one else did." She carried the child toward the exit, forcing herself not to look back at the soldiers holding the line. Outside, the city burned anew. The Vorik spread across the ruins like locusts, their crimson cores lighting the streets. The Horizon stood ready on the landing site, its engines glowing, its hull shaking as it prepared for takeoff. Crew members rushed the Iliari aboard, strapping them into seats, whispering promises they weren't sure they could keep. The Vorik closed in quickly, their shrieks echoing through the air. Ruiz and Hayes led the last group of soldiers toward the ship, firing wildly to slow the machines. One Vorik leapt onto the Horizon's hull, its claws slicing into the metal. Sparks rained as it began to tear its way inside. Hayes shouted, sprinting forward with a detonator in hand. "Get them out of here!" Ruiz turned sharply. Hayes no, but Hayes didn't stop. He leapt onto the Vorik, slamming the charge into its core. For a brief second, the two figures struggled, machine and man locked in deadly embrace. Then the explosion lit the sky. The Vorik was destroyed. So was Hayes. The Horizon's engines roared, lifting the ship from the burning city. Ruiz stood at the ramp, staring at the smoke below. Her chest ached with loss, but she forced herself to focus. The Iliari were aboard. The mission was not yet over. As the Horizon ascended into the red sky, the Vorik swarmed below like ants, watching with glowing eyes. They did not pursue. Not yet. But their presence was clear. They had seen humanity. They had marked them. In the silence of the ship, the Iliari survivor spoke again, its voice soft but heavy. "Now you understand. They cannot be stopped. They cannot be escaped. They will come for you." Ruiz stood over the alien, her eyes hard with resolve. "Then let them come. Humanity doesn't run." But even as she spoke the words, the static in the comms returned, louder than ever, almost like a laugh. The Vorik had heard Earth's answer, and now they would reply. The Horizon returned to Earth with the Iliari survivors hidden deep within its hull. The crew disembarked in silence, their faces marked by the memory of Vorik machines tearing through the city. Hayes' sacrifice weighed heavily on every heart, but there was no time to mourn. The signal had changed everything. Earth was no longer a distant blue world hiding at the edge of the galaxy. It had been seen. It had been marked. Humanity now stood alone against something far beyond anything they had faced before. Captain Ruiz stood in the war room of the United Earth Defense Command, her hands resting on the table as the generals and scientists argued. Some called for secrecy, to bury the Iliari and their warnings, to pretend Earth was still safe. Others demanded immediate war preparations. The room buzzed with fear. Ruiz's voice cut through like a blade. "The Vorik will come. They don't stop. You all heard the recordings. You saw what we brought back. We can't pretend this away." A hush fell. Dr. Cross placed her datapad on the table, the Iliari's trembling voice recorded for all to hear. "They cannot be stopped. They cannot be escaped. They will come for you." The words silenced even the boldest generals. For the first time in centuries, humanity felt small. The Iliari survivors were brought into a secure facility, their frail bodies wrapped in human blankets, their glowing eyes scanning every corner as if expecting Vorik to tear through the walls at any moment. One of them, a tall Iliari elder with scars along his face, spoke softly. "You have fire. You have spirit, but it will not save you. It never saved us." Ruiz crouched beside him. "Maybe not, but we're not you." Her words were sharp, but inside she wondered if they were only pride. In the days that followed, Earth entered a frenzy of activity. Factories lit their furnaces night and day, building ships faster than ever before. Orbital yards swarmed with engineers, constructing weapons of untested design. New defense systems were rushed into production, every scientist forced in a service for survival. Rumors spread across the cities. Whispers of an enemy no human had ever seen before, a nightmare that destroyed entire civilizations, and that Earth had somehow attracted its gaze. Panic brewed, but so did resolve. Soldiers volunteered in droves, men and women willing to stand in defense of their home, even against machines from the void. Humanity had always stood alone. They had fought wars that tore continents apart, and still they endured. This would be no different. Yet as preparations continued, the Vorik made their presence known. It began with whispers in the static. Earth's deep space satellites picked up strange transmissions, garbled echoes that grew clearer by the day. Then ships vanished on the edge of the solar system, freighters gone without a trace. A mining station near Jupiter sent a final desperate message before falling silent, its crew never seen again. Humanity watched the void and realized the enemy was already here. Ruiz stood on the horizon's bridge once more, staring at Earth's blue curve far below. Hayes's empty seat haunted her. Dr. Cross studied data streams, trying to decode Vorik signals, her eyes red with exhaustion. "They're learning," she muttered. "Every time we respond, they adapt. It's like they're not just listening, they're studying us." Ruiz's jaw tightened. "Then let them study. They'll learn what happens when you come for humanity." But even she felt the tremor of doubt. Humanity had no allies. The Galactic Council remained silent, watching from the distance. No other species dared speak. It was as if they had all abandoned Earth, leaving them to fight alone against the enemy no one else could stop. On the streets of human cities, people prepared in their own ways. Families built shelters, schools taught children evacuation drills, and religious leaders spoke of the Vorik as demons sent to test mankind. Yet there was no despair. Fear burned, yes, but beneath it was something harder, stronger. Defiance. Humanity had always been underestimated, always seen as reckless, fragile, too young to survive in the galaxy. Now they stood at the edge of extinction, and still they sharpened their blades. In the darkness of space, Vorik shapes were glimpsed more often, crimson cores pulsing like evil stars. Humanity knew the storm was coming. They had heard the warning. They had seen what the Vorik did to worlds. But unlike the Iliari, unlike all the others who had fallen, humanity was ready to answer. In the command center, Ruiz stood before the Global Council. Her voice was steady, her eyes burning with the fire that had carried her through every battle. "We stand alone. No one is coming to save us. But that has always been our way. We will fight. We will bleed. And if we must fall, we will make sure the Vorik remember humanity for the rest of time." The chamber erupted, not in argument but in thunderous resolve. For the first time in history, every nation, every people, every soldier stood united. Not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to surrender. In the void beyond Earth, the Vorik watched. Their crimson cores glowed brighter, their static-filled whispers growing louder. The hunters had found their prey, but this time the prey had teeth. The first Vorik ships appeared at the edge of the solar system like shadows cutting across the stars. They came without warning, sliding into view with silent menace. Their hulls were black as night, their crimson cores glowing like the hearts of dying suns. No signals, no offers, no words, only machines driven by a hunger older than humanity itself. Earth satellites caught their arrival, and the warning went out across the planet. The Vorik were here. Humanity had no more time. The defenses built in desperate months now faced their trial. Orbital cannons lined the skies. Warships floated above Earth, their hulls fresh from the yards, many untested, but all bristling with weapons. On the ground, cities dimmed their lights, and families huddled in shelters, listening to the sound of sirens echoing in the night. Captain Ruiz stood on the bridge of the horizon, staring at the enemy fleet filling the void. She remembered Hayes's sacrifice. She remembered the Eliary's warning. And now, she knew, it was humanity's turn to be tested. "All ships," she said calmly, though her heart thundered. "This is it. No one else will fight for us. Today we prove what it means to be human." Across the fleet, voices answered, steady, resolute. The battle began with light. The Vorik unleashed beams of searing red energy, carving through space, striking at Earth's defenses. Human ships responded, Missiles streaking through the void, railguns firing slugs faster than sound. Explosions lit the dark, silent and terrible, a storm in the endless night. Ships on both sides fell, burning wrecks drifting into the void. The Vorik adapted quickly, their machines shifting, changing, bending to counter human weapons. But humanity was not predictable. They fought with chaos, with fury, with every trick and tactic learned through centuries of war. Ruiz's voice carried through the chaos. Push them back. Don't give them an inch. The horizon roared as its cannons fired, tearing into a Vorik destroyer until it cracked apart. Yet even as they fell, more came. For every Vorik ship destroyed, 2 more emerged from the shadows. Earth's skies shook as debris rained down, burning streaks of light cutting across the atmosphere. On the ground, people watched, knowing the battle above would decide their future. Dr. Cross sat at her console, her hands flying across the controls. "They're trying to overwhelm us," she muttered. "It's not just an attack, it's extermination." Ruiz answered without hesitation. "Then we show them extermination goes both ways." But inside, she knew the truth. Humanity was outnumbered. The Vorik were endless. If something didn't change, Earth would fall. Then, a voice crackled over the comms. It was the Iliari Elder, his tone quiet but burning with new resolve. "You are different," he said. "We saw only despair. But you fight as if fire itself is in your blood. If you will have us, we will fight with you." For a moment, silence fell across the comms. Then Ruiz nodded sharply. "Then stand with us. If we fall together." The Iliari survivors, weak but determined, connected their knowledge to humanity's systems. They revealed Vorik vulnerabilities, old patterns from battles long past, secrets buried in their machines. With this knowledge, humanity struck harder. Missiles found weak points. Cannons pierced armor that had once seemed invincible. For the first time, the Vorik faltered. Still, the cost was heavy. Human ships fell in flames. Brave crews gave their lives, ramming their vessels into Vorik cores, detonating in brilliant bursts that shattered the night. The horizon itself was scarred, its hull burning, alarms blaring. Ruiz stood firm, her hand gripping the rail as the bridge shook. "We hold the line," she shouted. "We are Earth." Below, on the surface, ground defenses fired into the skies. Giant rail cannons hidden in mountains sent slugs ripping through descending Vorik machines. Cities lit up with anti-air fire, humanity refusing to surrender even as Vorik drones broke through the clouds. Streets turned into battlegrounds, soldiers fighting hand to hand against machines, civilians throwing fire and steel to defend their homes. Humanity was bleeding, but they would not bow. At the height of the chaos, Dr. Cross shouted, her eyes wide. "Captain, I found something." She pointed at the data stream on her console. "They're cores, they're connected, like a hive. If we hit the central one, the rest may fall with it." Ruiz looked at the massive Vorik command ship, its crimson heart pulsing like a star blood. Every instinct told her this was their only chance. "All ships," she called, her voice carrying across the dying fleet. "Focus everything on that core. This ends now." The horizon led the charge, its weapons blazing. Human ships, battered and broken, rallied one last time. They threw everything they had, missiles, cannons, ramming strikes, into the command ship. The Vorik fought back with brutal fury, tearing ships apart, but humanity did not stop. With one final cry, Ruiz gave the order. "Fire everything." The horizon's main cannon burned brighter than ever before, tearing a hole straight through the Vorik core. For a heartbeat, all was silent. Then, in a blinding burst, the command ship erupted, its crimson light shattering, fading into nothing. Across the battlefield, Vorik ships froze. Their cores flickered, dimmed, and one by one, they fell silent, drifting dead into the void. Humanity had done it. Against the endless machines, against the silence of the galaxy, they had stood alone and survived. Earth's skies cleared, and for the first time in centuries, the Vorik were defeated. On the bridge of the horizon, Ruiz leaned against the console, her face streaked with blood and ash. "We're still here," she whispered. Dr. Cross sat beside her, exhausted, tears in her eyes. The Eliari elder bowed his head. "You did what we never could. You fought when all others would run. Humanity has changed everything." And across the earth, from shelters to battlefields, a truth burned bright. Humanity was no longer the silent world at the edge of the galaxy. They were the fire in the dark. They had answered the call, and the galaxy would never forget it.